Alrighty. What's going on, guys and girls? Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have an interesting guest on the podcast. Mitch is a guy who I've done a lot of personal development work with over the years. Mitch is actually sort of marks the beginning of my personal development journey back in 2018. I had a few things going on at the time, and we spent quite a lot of time, money, and energy working through a few of those things. So I thought it would only be fair to have you back on the podcast. Come and talk a little bit about who you are, what you do. I'm not sure either of us could tell a short story, so it's a good thing we've got a time buffer on today's podcast. But yeah, if you want to introduce yourself, tell the audience who you are, what you do.
So my name is Mitch Behan. I speak in the field of human development. I have done since about 1996. And I've shared the stage numerous times with people like Joe Dispenza, Jack Canfield, Paul Bailey, just to name a few. I've had a huge interest in human development ever since I was very, very young. I came from a very Catholic background, and I never swallowed that whole pill. I think I was the only Catholic in Ireland that never swallowed that whole pill. But so I was raised always questioning everything, and that paid off much later in my life when. So yeah, that's what I do. I speak on human development and human transformation, and I have a keen interest in it, in being able to portray the reality and the truth in the human development field, because it's murky at the moment.
It is a little bit murky. I think the personal development industry is currently getting a bad rap because of how saturated it's becoming. You're basically seeing everyone and their mum has, if you go anywhere near Bali, everyone and their mum has a coaching business in Bali and they're a coach. Yeah. But I think probably the bit that needs demystifying is that most coaches haven't got a fucking clue what they're doing, and they don't have any money or results to show from it, and yet they're a coach.
The funny thing is, I hear that quite a bit, right? But it's always had a bad rap. It really, really has always had a bad rap. And if I give you just a brief history of human transformation in Western civilization, you had Mahesh Yogi take into his ashram in the early 60s, the Beatles. So the last time the Beatles were together were in his ashram. And in fact, they wrote 32 songs there. Now, I've been to the Beatles ashram 4 times, which is Mahesh's ashram in a place called Rishikesh, Lakshmanjula, which is the yoga capital of the world. So most of the major ashrams are there, and it's at the foothills of the Himalaya. So what happened was, when the Beatles went there, they went through this whole spiritual revolution. But over the time period, they were being televised. Where's the Beatles? Well, the Beatles are over here in India, and they're with this guru, and they're studying metaphysics. And in doing that, and just so you understand what metaphysics is the greatest explanation I could probably give you is the reason why we do the things that we do. That's what metaphysics is. So when this happened, suddenly you had this exodus of Westerners from all over the world making their way to Rishikesh, to Lakshmanjula. And then you had these what we call sadhus, which are kind of, in some cases, they're traveling salesmen, but in other cases, they were living in the foothills of the Himalaya, meditating monks, and they would make their way down, and they would teach yoga, and they would also teach spirituality and metaphysics. And then you had these Westerners then take this information, and they bring it back to the US and to Europe. And then that really started that revolution. And it's funny, there's an ashram that we do a lot of, it's not an ashram, it's a school. It's an orphanage that we donate a lot of money to, and we spend a lot of time working with these guys up in Rishikesh. And the owner is, from the 60s, she never left. She used to be married to Osho, and she's really interesting, but she was a Hollywood superstar that ended up over there. So there was a lot of that happened. And then, so that Eastern philosophy was now brought back into Western civilization. And when it was brought back into Western civilization, of course, it was bastardized. And then it was tweaked and it was manipulated. And then you had this movement happen. And there was a guy named Werner Erhard. And Werner Erhard, he studied Zen Buddhism. And then as he studied Zen, he was a car salesman, and he studied Zen Buddhism. He then created this seminar called EST Training. And EST Training came out of the US, and there was 1 million people went to this event over 2 years. Now, what happened then is that the CIA got involved, and Werner Erhard, they went after him because you had people like Yoko Ono, Buckminster Fuller, so John Lennon. All of these people all went through this event, this EST training. Now, S Training, there's a great book, if your listeners get a chance to find a copy of it, and it's called The Book of S. It's amazing. It's very, very, very good. And it tells the story from a participant in the event talking about the event. But what happened then was the EST training got the 60 Minutes were really quite scared of what was happening with this movement. So they came in and they basically turned him into a pedophile. 60 Minutes got involved based on the CIA push. And then they got his daughter to say that he'd sexually abused them. And then that was the end of S Training. But S Training then went on to become Landmark Forum. And Landmark Forum still today operates within the world. So the poo-pooing of the human development industry and the human transformation industry has been going since the 60s because it was a revolution in consciousness. You know, that revolution was never going to stop. You know, it was going to continue on. It was an escalation in vibration and understanding of who we were as human beings and the ability to walk away from dogmatic religion and start to contemplate, okay, who are we? Why are we here? How long are we here for? And what the fuck happens to us after all this? You know, which is the four primal questions that everybody asks themselves between the age of 28 and 35. So that was really what that movement was. So, you know, as somebody who's been speaking in the human development field for years, you know, and I've had some really, really great teachers, you know, like my two mentors introduced John DeMartini to his partner, Athena Starwoman, and then also Robert Kiyosaki, they introduced Robert Kiyosaki to his partner. So when I got into the industry, which was in the early 90s, I was studying under these people who were really, really switched on. But I remember when I first started learning, George, and I'd come home and I'd be like, suddenly I had this insatiable appetite to understand consciousness and what we were. And it was like suddenly somebody was speaking my language. You know, I started to realize this is not dogmatic. It's not being rammed down my throat. It's just a way of thinking about how we think. And if we can improve our lives, we can do that by improving how we think about how we think. So that really turned, for me, that really turned things around. But at that time, like I was coming home to Catholic parents that were looking at me going, oh my God, he's joined a cult. What the fuck is wrong with my son? He's losing his marbles, you know? And you couldn't talk about any of this stuff. But then what happened was around about early 2002, 2003, this word coach started getting thrown around. You know, it was, I'm a personal development coach, I'm this coach, I'm that coach. And, you know, like anything, like the word spirituality or the word metaphysics, that word now gets poo-pooed. And it's not to say that, you know, the coaching industry is like if you're standing in the middle of a paddock and you're surrounded by forests, you know, you run into one part of the forest and you go, okay, is this where, oh, no, there's fuck all in here. Okay, we'll go over to the other one. No, it's just full of ghosts and charlatans and da-da. And eventually you just end up in the middle of the paddock going, well, what the fuck do I do, you know? But that doesn't mean that there isn't proper information out there, you know, like and how do you know proper information? Well, these guys would have stood the test of time, they will have large followings, and they will have testimony. And that's really what you want to be looking for. If you're listening to someone who hasn't cut their teeth or been at the coalface of life in some way, you know, behind all great tragedy is great comedy, right? But in order to be able to make a difference, people have to have cut their teeth in some way. You know, the greater the void in a person's life, the greater the value, the bigger the destiny, the higher the calling, the greater the teacher. So there's simple questions you can ask to be able to sift through that stuff and find people that are actually doing the job that psychologists can't do, that psychotherapists can't do, because they can't fucking do it. You know, like there's a great documentary, I know I'm rambling, but there's a great documentary called it is called The Last Shaman, and they're interviewing psychologists from Princeton and Harvard because this father has a son that is going into the jungle to take plant medicine and he's really worried about him. And when he's interviewing these are the top educators and lecturers in the world, they're looking at him going, look, when it comes to biology, we're fucking all over it. But when it comes to psychology, we haven't got it. We are looking into a hedge. Most of the pills we're giving these kids or these people are literally placebos. We don't know what they do. They do something, but we don't know what they do and we don't know why they do it. So we have to understand that modern psychology now has to adapt to these new processes, otherwise it'll annihilate itself to reason to live, because, you know, modern psychology by deception has to keep a person sick, because if it made you well, it would have no reason to live. So by default, it has to keep you unwell. It doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't go after the cause. Where now there's techniques. I mean, you've done them with me. We've used them over the years. Now there's techniques that actually shift that person's innermost dominating thought, that actually transform a person's life from the inside out.
I think as well, you can kind of, as you said before, a healthy population is not a profitable one. The personal development industry kind of shortcuts what's now being seen as 10 to 15 years worth of psychology.
Yeah.
You'll have somebody that's decorated in the field of psychology. You've got all these counselling sessions where basically they come in and talk a bunch of nonsense for an hour and a half in the most polite way possible. Yeah. When in reality, there are elements of personal development, some of which you've done on me, some of which we practice together, etc., which can collapse a decade of psychological therapy in 45 minutes.
100%.
And I think that, you touched on it before, like a lot of this is actually quite well documented and quite ancient in its origin. Like a lot of it is Eastern originated and now it's becoming part of Western society. Now we're having things like science back up what the yogis and the mystics and some of these cuckoo conspiracy theorists have been talking about for 1,000 years is now being seen in the Western light, and everybody's like, well, hang on a minute, how come we're having such a bridge the gap moment in sort of modern day world? It's because a lot of those teachings and traditions now are being documented and studied under the scientific microscope, and people are sitting up and saying, oh shit, that actually works. Whereas
the thing to understand there is that philosophy without science is lame. It doesn't mean anything. So it's a really, really interesting time in reality right now. It's a really interesting time, and here's what I mean by that. 2012 was the beginning of the dawning of the age of Aquarius. But if you look at Pisces as a representation, and you understand it's two fish swimming away from one another, which was happened over 2,500 years ago, which was the separation of mind and matter. So we come out of these dark ages and into the light ages. Now, if you look at Pisces is representative. Aquarius is representative of two wave functions of consciousness. We are in a light age. We are in an information age. And so for people to understand what that means, energy now is coming in formation, in a formation that we're able to understand much greater. So I know there's a lot of talk around AI now and what's happening there with the access to information. But all we've done is we have found a tool to be able to access information at an exponential rate. But that information was always there. It just wasn't in a formation that we could access it. Does that make sense? So I think now there's as a result of that, there's two problems. The first, there's an opportunity and there's a problem. The first problem is that what you don't use, you're going to lose. So if you allow it to think for yourself, you're going to become a dum-dum, and that's how it is. Now, everybody uses it. Everybody uses it. But you have to take that information and then you have to be able to personally expand on what it is you've just understood. Doing that then allows you to take the information, as something that is expanding your consciousness, is allowing you to actually think greater than you're thinking, which is the only quality you need in order to be able to change your life. And it allows you to actually do that, to stop and actually think greater about how you're thinking, expand your consciousness, and we need that. It's always been there. We're just finding now in this information age ways to be able to access it. So information, which was already there, is expanding at a rate that is beyond human comprehension. Like, it's extraordinary what is happening right now. And here's the fucking crazy thing, is that you and I are alive in this time, and we are able to contemplate the incontemplatable. Does that make sense? To a point where, we're able to sit back and find ways to hack consciousness to completely change the trajectory of a human being's life. And what you're using and the processes we're using and we're doing on people are changing their lives, like in ways that it literally severs generations of lineages of trauma. Never being able to get ahead, never having any money, living in poverty. That's changing literally in a sitting, in a moment, in 45 minutes in a person's life. They suddenly see it and then they become unstoppable and they realize, hey, this whole thing had my back the whole time. In fact, it had everybody's back. And as a human being, I have an obligation now to take that and do something with it, because every other person led me to this point. It was my finding. I'm the one that's going to sever that chain or that link in that chain, and I'm the one that's going to go get it.
I listened to you say something in a seminar many years ago now, and I remember at the time contemplating it, not really thinking anything of it. It was at the end of one of your seminars that you guys offer, one of the first ones, and you guys sat down and said, we have just imparted some information on you. And, everyone agreed and nodded their head. And you went ahead and said, okay, so what we've just given you is a blessing and a curse. You said it's a blessing because we've now shown you something that you can no longer unsee. So you can choose to be ignorant to what we've shown you, but when you learn something new, you can't then unlearn that. You can ignore it, you can forget about it, but you can't unlearn it. And it's a curse because of that exact reason that you're now no longer able to ignore this. Every single time in your life that you're not living up to your highest expectation, you'll smash yourself and ridicule yourself and beat yourself up because now you know better. Mm-hmm. Previously, you didn't know better. And that's why, information is both a blessing and a curse because the more enlightened you become, the more morally obligated you become to do something with that enlightenment because the pursuit of, information, enlightenment, personal growth, etc., is both a blessing and a curse. And at the time, I was kind of like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Probably should have told me that at the start.
Over the years, I've been like, yeah, he's actually right because the more we learn, the more we consume, the more we grow. You sort of your thermostat for what I can do or what I know I can do starts to increase with it. But then when you don't live up to that expectation, you smash yourself for it because you're like, I fucking know better. I know I shouldn't be doing this. I know I shouldn't be going there. I know I shouldn't be doing that. I know now, and as we move further into this information age, the limits of what human beings are actually capable of is becoming more and more apparent. But with that comes the curse of, well, that's where my ceiling is. And my ceiling is much further away than I thought it was. And every time in my life I don't live up to that expectation, I slam myself for it.
Well, if I teach you how to never have to worry about money again, right? Which is one of the things we do with people, how to never, ever, ever have to worry about money again. Now, when I make that statement, people look at me and go, what the fuck are you talking about? Money is the easiest thing to sort out in a person's life. And money gives you two of the most important things in your life. It gives you choice and it gives you freedom. Yeah. So if I teach you how to never have to worry about money again, and you don't do anything with that, every morning you wake up, you will, not consciously, your conscious mind has no capacity to create anything in your life. At a deep subconscious motive, or a deep subconscious level, you will ridicule yourself, slam yourself, beat yourself up and put yourself down. The problem that happens with people, especially in the spirituality, personal development field right now, is that people go through two phases. Some people get caught in the first phase, and then other people break through to the second phase. The first phase is they hear information and they use it as inspiration, right? That's a problem. That is a fundamental problem in your growth. Mastery is to take the information and use it as instruction, not as inspiration. Okay, that inspired me, but I'm going to take that stuff now and I'm going to use it as instruction to be able to actually go and roll out the life that I want. But the field itself is full of people, and you hear it in their languaging. They're saying things like, "Oh, I'm working on myself right now." Really?
I'm reinventing myself.
I'm reinventing myself.
Oh
yes, I'm going through my trauma. Trauma is just there's no such thing as trauma. I know people don't want to hear that, but I can tell you, I've seen situations and cases with people that would turn your hair white. That when a person sees it completely, they realize, oh my God, this is the greatest blessing that ever happened to me. Yeah. So the trauma is basically your inability to see the blessing in what occurred to you, and what traumatizes you is you're holding onto the story when there's a deep-seated, innate part of you that goes, you are not meant to live your life like this. What are you fucking talking about? You're meant to spend 70 years on this planet carrying around this stuff, feeling as if you have to fit in. What if everything that happened to you was actually designed to make you stand out? That's what it was designed to do. It wasn't. You're not a victim of your history. You'll never master your destiny until you understand that you're not a victim of your history. That your history is there to equip you and tool you up. Now, when people hear this, they go, oh, that's really inspiring. But the question is, what are you personally doing about that? If you're hearing this information and you're still using your perceived trauma to stop you going and fulfilling a destiny, which is the immortal nature of why you're here to leave this place a better place. That's what you want to get to the end of your life and look back and say, I made this place a better place. I made this better for the people that are coming after me, and every human being has a desire to do that. You don't want to get to the end of your life and look back and think, the fuck did I carry that through my life for? What did I do that for? And so, it boils back to going, look, Don't take information as inspiration unless you're going to turn it into instruction. And if people are just giving you information that inspires you, run. No. Run, because it's a trap. And I promise you, you're just going to prolong the inevitable. You want to be dealing and working with people that are right. Okay, we're going to break through. That's what we're going to do. We're going to break through this glass ceiling, whatever this thing is, and we're going to go get it. And you have to also work with people, like you see this, George, right? You got to work with people that can be held accountable. You got to hold their hand, keep them accountable. Never work with a person unless you are committed in their life to getting them to where they want to get to, so that the two of you are at that finish line going, well done.
I think as well, like in the personal development world, you actually find yourself leveling up in the pursuit of helping others do the same. Like everybody, whether you've been in the game for 20 years, 5 years, 2 years, there'll be a level of sort of thermostat that you're sitting at. And I think the misconception is that you need to find somebody that's at level, let's say you're at level 79. You've got to find someone that's at level 88 and get them to 100. No, you don't. There's plenty of people that are underneath level 79 who somebody's at level 20 and they want to get to 50. Somebody's at 46 and they'd like to be at level 60. And in the pursuit of helping them through instruction, not inspiration, you then find yourself leveling up to 85 in the process, because you don't come out of the womb at level 100. It's layer by layer, by fractal, by fractal, by fractal. And in the pursuit of helping others get from where they want to be, not where you think they should be, you find yourself leveling up at the same time. And I think, you touched on it before about people at the start. You mentioned people asking themselves questions, the 4 fundamental questions. Who are we? Why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing? What happens after? I think we were roughly about the same age when we asked ourselves those questions. I was about 25, and I asked myself, what am I supposed to be doing here? And it sort of came at a time where I was working in the construction industry. I did a plumbing apprenticeship. I'd gone through the trade background, etc. Had a bunch of different startups, emoji, air fresheners, inflatable photography business, luxury car hire plan, baby burrito onesies. Could have done with one of those now, but at the time it didn't work. And all of those startups never really went anywhere. And it got to like 25 and I was kind of like, what am I doing? Like this can't. I started to question sort of the, not dogma, but the normal stuff that everybody else does. Home ownership in your early 20s as your primary place of residence. On the merry-go-round, 4 weeks annual leave a year, save up so that you can go on a vacation to vacate your life. Who the fuck said that was a good idea? And for me, that occurred about the age of 25. And it wasn't until I started, obviously I learned how to trade the financial markets. That was the beginning of my personal development journey. In lesson number 1, they had a video from Bob Proctor, may he rest in peace, about the law of attraction. And I watched that law of attraction video and something in my brain went, okay, there's a thread here. I need to pull on this thread. I don't fully know where this thread is going to go, but whatever he said in that 9 or 10 minute YouTube video, the hook was in. And I was like, cool, I need to consume as much information as possible in the field of human development. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and that sort of led me into sitting in a seminar room with you guys. And for me, the biggest thing that came up off the back of that, which this is where I'm going with this, is self-sabotage. And as a younger man, I had lots of self-sabotage around relationships, drug abuse problems, alcohol, sabotaging tendencies, some of which we all go through. And I've noticed it in some of my clients, mostly all of my clients. Everybody has sabotaging related tendencies. And I think that for the people that are listening to this, one of the biggest reasons that will stop you from getting to where you're trying to get to is that every time you'll move through the levels, you'll get to a point. Maybe the point is, you having somebody on a pedestal feeling like you're going to surpass them. Maybe the point is $1 million. Maybe it's $100,000. Maybe it's $10 million. Maybe it is a certain title on your board in the office. Everybody has their thermostat. What do you think is the primary factor for why people sabotage? And for the people that are listening to this, what would be your tips for people who find themselves sabotaging in different areas of their life? Because for me, that's one of the most common things that I notice amongst my clients is self-sabotage holding them back.
There's a great meme going around at the moment with Joe Dispenza, and he makes a great statement, which is sabotage is an energy issue. And I want to add to that because it's actually more. And sabotage is a loyalty issue and an energy issue. So if you can imagine that the purpose of the brain is to get you to your deathbed safely. How does it do that? It does it through your 5 senses. We actually have 34 senses. But all you know about and all most of your people will know about is your five senses: touch, taste, smell, sight, sound. The purpose of touch, taste, smell, sight, sound is it's the brain's way of getting you to your deathbed safely. Fornicate, duplicate, defecate, urinate, that's its job. And it does that. So the brain really forms 85% of its concepts of its reality by the time you're 8 years old. So by the time you're 8 years old, you're having, on average, 60,000 thoughts an hour and one new thought every 4 days. By the time you're 34, you're not having any more new thoughts. So what happens then is the brain just wants to keep you comfortable. Now, the problem with comfort is that growth can't not occupy the same space as comfort. It can't do it. So in order to grow, you have to become uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Now, so therefore, when you leave here, you're going to get into the car, you're going to drive down the street, you're going to be bombarded, essentially, touch, taste, smell, sight, sound, and things are going to be making you feel uncomfortable. You have interest rate rises, fuel, petrol, all petty stuff, right? That makes us feel uncomfortable. But when you grab hold of a vision that is bigger than the pettiness of that discomfort, and you grab hold of the reins of that vision and you focus on that vision, now you're in charge of your discomfort. But what you're also doing is that you're taking the brain and you're putting it into inappropriate states of stress. And so whether it's a vision that you're focusing on, whether it's a fine or an interest rate rise or a saber-toothed tiger, it doesn't matter. The mammalian brain kicks in. So what happens is that when you step outside of the box of normality, it's an energy thing. So what happens then is that your brain wants to make you comfortable. So what it does is, or what it wants to do is, it wants to drag you back into old states. So what it does is it sabotages by bringing up old problems. You find yourself having an argument with your partner that you had 2 years ago, but that's your brain. It's an energy problem. That's your brain trying to drag you back into where it is you want to be. So the key to avoid that is you first have to understand that this whole thing you're in is a fucking energy game. It's all about energy. But most people have no idea what their energy is. They just don't know. They have never felt their energy. They've never in any way controlled their energy. They've never attached their energy to an outcome. They go, when I get to this outcome, then I'm going to have this certain sensation. Right? But the key to create, or the key to mastery, is you have to master your energy as if you've already had the outcome. So you got to turn up in that energy continuously, no matter what the situation. And every time some old argument or some old situation or some old car crash or whatever you go through that's dragging you back into old states of your energy, you have to see them as life trying to tell you, focus. Focus on your energy. Grab hold of your energy. Know what it feels like to feel the sensation of being handed that belt. Know what it feels like to feel the sensation of being handed that award. Know what it feels like to feel the sensation as if the audience is standing on its chairs applauding you. And keep showing up in that energy and turn up there before you arrive and wait there in that energy continuously until you turn up. Now, so sabotage is part of the process. It's part of the process. You have to go through that. It's a bit like recovering from being an alcoholic. Part of recovery is you got to fall off the wagon. Part of recovery, or part of creating anything in your life, is stagnation. It's all part of it. But you can't, when it happens, you got to see, if you start ridiculing yourself and beating yourself up, that's what drags you back into that. So I'll give you another really, really great tip on being able to accomplish something, right? And it's the difference between, I've said this to you before, but it's the difference between a person that has a vision for their lives and a visionary. So the person that has a vision for their lives, they're conflicted. Because what do? They live in a dualistic reality. They come along and they go, I'm going to be a chiropractor. And then they start announcing it to the world publicly. And everything in humanity is in duality. So we got, everything is from the macroscopic universe to the microscopic universe. Everything is polarized, plus, minus. That's how it is. So they publicly start announcing to the world, hey, I'm going to become a chiropractor. And then they attach to that announcement a positive emotion. Now, they tell their mum, they tell their dad, they tell their uncle, they tell their professor, they tell their school teacher, and they're announcing to the world publicly, and they have a new vision for their lives. And let's say they're 22, 23, 24 years old. But privately, every morning they wake up, they ridicule themselves and slam themselves and beat themselves up because they don't know how the fuck they're going to get there, right? Now, this is everybody, right? But I'm going to tell you now what a visionary does. What a visionary does is they take no credit. They come up with the vision. They don't publicly announce it, so therefore they don't privately ridicule themselves. So they take no credit. They take no blame. They just keep their focus on the aim. And if the aim is to become a chiropractor, they then reverse engineer every single step from them getting the degree, being handed to them, all the way back to where they are tomorrow morning, so that when they get out of bed tomorrow morning, they always know what it is they need to do next. So therefore, there's no conflict. So there's no room for sabotage. Does that make sense? Because they're already there. And so that's the difference between 90% of the population of the planet and probably 8% that actually ends up mastering their lives. The other two are we don't really know what happens with those people. They're not NPCs and stuff like that. But realistically, you have to understand what the vision is. You have to understand part of the stuff that happens along the way. And so it's 100% an energy game. Final thing, the loyalty thing. In my early 20s, I worked out I had a loyalty to my father's success. It wasn't a conscious loyalty, it was a subconscious loyalty. And every time I would go to do something, like I'd meet a new partner, I'd fall madly in love, but I had this conscious view of my parents' relationship. So as soon as I felt as if I was going to have more love in my relationship than my father has with my mother, I'd sabotage it. My father's success, as soon as I felt as if I was just about to financially surpass him, I couldn't go into work anymore. I couldn't stand the drive there, so I would sabotage it. So part of your sabotage is the loyalties you have subconsciously to the people around you that got you to where you want to get to. And the key to that is you have to become accountable, meaning you have to stop and realize that every single person that ever put a breath into getting you to where you are, you owe them to succeed. You owe them to make something of your life, because every breath that they took was about making sure that you had the opportunity to go get what you want. So you are obligated to succeed. You're obligated to get to the end of your life and look back at what happened and know that you made it better for everybody that's going to come ahead of you.
When you mentioned the visionary analogy before, we touched on the fact that science and sort of Eastern mysticism, which is now personal development, are sort of converging, right? You're seeing that in the visionary sense with quantum physics. Quantum physics, if you subscribe to those narratives, which is kind of hard not to now, you've got an infinite number of realities that exist at any one point in time. Well, that means that there's a version of you in the future that is being the things that you're trying to accomplish. That means that if that reality exists somewhere out there, you mentioned it before, the last thing to feel and associate what you're trying to do, touch, taste, smell, sight, and sound, then that means that the version of you in the future that's being everything that you're trying to get to, all you need to do is get familiar with that version and bring that version back into the future. Eats a certain way, sleeps a certain way, interviews a certain type of person, works with certain types of clients, has certain types of financial success in their life, goes to a certain type of gym, exercises a certain way. There's a version of you which is doing all of those things. The sooner that you can get familiar with that reality and start to tangle with it on a real-time basis, the sooner that reality will become part of your physical existence, which is the visionary game, right?
Yeah, I think a cool way to look at this is, let's say I said to you that everything that you want, the car, the house, the accolades, the success, the money in the bank account, the villa in the south of France, the cars in the south of France, the ship, everything that you want, everything, you're getting it in 6 months. 100%. The universe goes, it's done. It's done. Like 6 months' time to this date, that is yours. You've got it all. It's done. What would change in you? The first thing is you would feel a sense of connectedness. The next thing is you would feel a sense of relief. The next thing is you would feel the deepest sense of appreciation and gratitude for life itself. And gratitude, like, I spend my life talking about this word. Like, my life is spent taking people to moments of gratitude and tagging their consciousness with what it is to actually feel unlimited gratitude. And the expression of that is, thank you, I love you. So the key is honing your consciousness to be able to feel that sensation all the time. as if what it is that you want has already happened. And that is the key to creating anything in your life. The first thing is that, there's 7 levels to creating things. The first thing is what we think about, we bring about. The second thing is what we feel about, we bring about. Now, in understanding that thinking and feeling, the first thing is you have to have the thought, but the next thing is that the feeling has to be congruent with the outcome of the thought. Now, if the feeling that you are having is not congruent with the thoughts, you can have had as many thoughts on what it is you want to have, but let me tell you, motherfucker, this is a feeling game. No matter what anybody says, this is a feeling game. It's all about your energy, because we now know we have cells inside of our form called glial cells. And we used to think the word glial is Latin for glue. So they used to think that the glial cells were the cells that glued all the other organs together in the body. But what they then worked out was the glial cells were actually the cells that communicate between the organs in the body. Then they worked out that the glial cells were actually broadcasting outside into what we call mind, because mind is not something that's in here. It doesn't matter where we've looked in the human form, we can't find it. So mind is something that happens in the field of potential. And the field of potential is everything that happens outside of you. And we can now gauge your interaction by measuring the frequencies where you, up to 9 meters with what we're capable of doing now, we can measure when you are in a state of gratitude and you are tingling with absolute certainty. And the only way to do that is you have to live in your highest values. So if you're in your highest values, you're fulfilling your destiny, you're in a state of absolute gratitude, you are now broadcasting that into the atmosphere. That means that what you were broadcasting into the atmosphere with that intensity is tangling with particles to bring about what you're feeling about. So therefore, that is the key to everything. It's all a feeling game. But if you wake up every morning and you look in the mirror and go, you're an asshole, you're ugly, you just didn't sleep properly, remember what you said last week, remember what you did last year, remember what that school teacher said to you, remember. Memory is a distortion of the truth, and it robs you of your destiny. And so the key is you wake up in the morning when your brain is in alpha and theta. This is the creation waves. And when you're in those waves, before you get into beta, before you go and smash your brain with coffee, you stop and you take the time to just feel into the sensation of gratitude and attach that to a visualization of how you want things to roll out. Now you're mastering your destiny. Now nothing else is in the way. And you just, every opportunity that you get, that's what you do.
Just become magnetic. You meet people and they've got the X factor. You're like, I need to take that person to lunch. I need to buy them a coffee. You come into contact with these people periodically and you're like, they're in flow. Call it whatever, lots of different synonyms for it. But whether you're in flow, whether you're magnetic, whether you're in your highest values, there are signatures for that state of consciousness, which you'll see when you come into contact with these people. So on the topic of consciousness, you and I have done some plant medicine over the years, and I had an interesting experience with consciousness. So how my understanding of consciousness has sort of been reinforced by you and I did some DMT together. My understanding of consciousness has been reinforced by my DMT experience, which I'll happily discuss. How do you define consciousness, and how has your understanding of consciousness evolved over the years, and what role did the DMT experience play in that? And maybe it's not the same that it played in mine, but okay. I'm curious about your understanding of consciousness.
Okay, so there's a fantastic movie called What the Bleep Do We Know?
It's a great movie.
Now, in the movie, they're interviewing some of the top physicists and metaphysicists and people in the field of human transformation, right from Trinity College through to Oxford. It's really quite an incredible piece. And they all say the same thing, and I have to join them in that. We really don't know. We actually don't know. We can surmise what we think it is. But I think we're trying to contemplate the incontemplatable. I don't think it's contemplatable with our present levels of awareness. But I'm going to have a really ignorant stab at it. But I think consciousness is the bare essence of what we actually are. And what we actually are is just energy expressing itself. That's what I feel we are. My first, I've done lots of plant medicine. Like I've done lots of LSD, all sorts of stuff like that ever since my early 20s because I was a raver. So I did lots of that sort of stuff. But I remember having my first experience of ayahuasca. And when I went to have this experience, I felt like I said to the person, listen, I fucking don't have a drug experience. I've done loads of drugs. If that's what this is, I'm not interested. And lots of my clients and my staff had been going, you need to go do this. This is a cool thing to do. And I'd been to the Americas. In the Americas, I'd sat with some shamans and they'd said, you need to do it. The forest is calling you. It's called you numerous times. You need to go. I went and I had this experience and it was so mind-blowing. It just absolutely blew my mind. And I was sitting with this woman. She'd been traveling in and out of the Americas for over 30 years. And she was working with a Christian group that were making the brew. They produced over 300 tons of it a year and they pray over it. And then, so I drink this medicine. It tasted like, it's indescribable how putrid it is. And I put on this eye mask. I'm laid down on this bed, this mattress. There's about 8 of us in the room. And she speaks 12 languages, plays about 20 instruments, and she starts to sing to us and gets us all toning and humming and singing. And then next of all, you just start to feel this sensation of energy. And then it's just coming through you like, you know, I'm in the jungle and I'm like, oh my God. And I can feel this medicine just working through my body, you know, and it's like it flows of the breeze, but the breeze is actually moving through every cell. It was just like, it was really, really, really full on. Like it was full on. And I remember coming out thinking, you know, it gave me a beautiful message about my children. It showed me my children as 3 individual pots with 3 individual plants. And it showed me that the only thing I can do is create the environment where the plant is going to grow and I can only put water in. The rest of it, I have to leave it up to consciousness. So I then went and I had an experience of DMT. One of my managers actually said to me, you need to learn how to let go, Mitch. You need to experience letting go. So I went and I had this experience of dimethyltryptamine, and I thought that the ayahuasca was full on, but oh my God. So I had 5-MeO, which is the frog, and I smoked this substance. And it takes you through 3 realms. The first realm was just complete release. So you cannot hold on. So you cannot hold on. So I remember just lying back, and then suddenly it's just like whoa, 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 and then my consciousness is just out of my body, and then I'm out of my body, and I can feel my body, and I can hear my breath like this. But I am not in my body. And the only thing that is connecting me is my pranayama, which is my breath. You know, I can hear the breath connecting me. And then I burst through into this state of just geometric formations, just everything coming in and out. Whoa, 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 whoa. And then it takes me into this next level where I go into this gray space where there's just nothing. It's just a sense of nothingness. And it was like the medicine was just trying to say, okay, you're okay. And I remember it talking to me, saying to me, you're okay. It's all okay. Everything is okay, Mitch. It's all okay. And then once I got that, I then busted through into this space of just knowing everything. And in that space, I was just in this absolute state of my pure self. Does that make sense? And I was in this state of my pure self, and I was just in this state of joy, and it was like it was just letting me know it's all okay. It doesn't mean anything. And when I understood that, I meant that what I understood was that it doesn't mean anything, and in that it actually means everything. And the key to understanding your consciousness is to get that whatever you think it is, you couldn't be any fucking further from the truth. And the pursuit is to be able to connect with that truth and to do what you can to humble yourself to the divinity of the fact that you are just light. And so I think consciousness is an expression of the pure God force energy. And when I talk about God, I'm not talking about an anthropomorphic being sitting in the clouds taking score. I like to explain God as generator, orchestrator, destroyer, grand organizing design. And this thing is grand that we are in, and it's constantly organizing itself, and there's a design to it. There's a hidden order to what's going on. And the key is not to get caught up in it. You know, the key is to understand your divinity, and you're here for a certain amount of time. And in that time period is just to make sure that when you get to the end of this, you look back on everything and go, I did good. That's really what the key of it is. Now, the other thing that we were talking about earlier, which is there's a lot of people that are, you know, doing plant medicine and this, everyone's a coach and blah, 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 blah. And you have to be really careful of that stuff. Like, you really, really do. Like, I would never encourage anybody to go and do plant medicine unless they are doing it with proper people who absolutely know what the fuck they are doing, because it is a double-edged sword. But one of the things, I was in Bali and I was with a really interesting guy. His name is Warren, and his partner Nat introduced me. And we were having a conversation and we were talking about something really cool. And Nat said something to me. She said to me, Mitch, what I've noticed with people and their use of plant medicine is that they go to use plant medicine to heal their past. And ayahuasca is called the ropes of the dead in Peru. And because it brings up these things of the past to help you to understand things and to let go of them so that you can evolve and grow. And what I found was with the movement is that, you know, if you're going to go and meet your highest self, like if you're going to go and meet your the highest echelon of who you are, the highest understanding of your consciousness, like your highest theos, your greatest meaning, you're going to sit across the table from that part of yourself, right? Why would you bring a bag of human shit and put it on the table and say, hey, higher self, can you fix this? Why would you do that? That's nonsense. But that seems to be what people think the medicine is for. But in actual fact, the medicine is there for you to take all of that out of the way and actually connect with your highest self and dance with your highest self and understand the darkness in your life. Without that darkness, you would never see. Darkness invites light. That's all it does. So that darkness in your life actually brings you to connect with the highest of who you are. So when you're there with that part of yourself, your objective is just to feel that sense of appreciation and love and thank you. And when you understand it like that, you realize that all those things that happened, they don't mean anything other than the meaning you gave it. And the greatest meaning you can give it is to turn it into a tool or a piece of equipment to help you to go and leave this world a better place.
Instruction, not inspiration.
Not inspiration.
I feel like the whole plant medicine movement, as you said, it's like, well, I go in there with all my bills and mummy didn't love me and daddy hurt me or she beat me up or I was raped, abused, neglected. Let me just go and take plant medicine to heal it. When in actual fact, you know, if we rewind 2,500 years where plant medicine was as readily available, probably more readily available than it is today, that's not the reason that they did it. And I think for me, obviously we did DMT together. When I had my DMT experience, I remember going in there and I remember you asking me, oh, why are you here? What are you doing here? And I said, look, I've always had a bit of a keen understanding in consciousness and the nature of reality. And I've been asking myself some provocative questions the last few years. And I'm not entirely sure how or why, but I feel as if this is going to increase my sphere of influence. Not going to answer all the questions for me, but I feel called to it and there's something for me here. And again, disclaimer, as you mentioned before, it's not an open invitation for everyone to go and do plant medicine. It is not a party trick. It's not to be used on a Sunday with the boys after having 10 beers. It's in a ceremonial setting. If you feel so called to do so, then it's something to explore and research and come to your own conclusion on. But for me, that was sort of a quest to understand a bit more about the nature of reality. And, you know, in a little more layman terms, I sort of view it as consciousness being some kind of exponential field of potential, energetic potential. I'm not really sure I have the words to describe it, but something that exists outside of us that we are also a part of, if that is my best description of describing it. And I sort of perceive that consciousness devolves itself, I'm going to say down, maybe up, I'm not sure, devolves itself from somewhere in order to have a physical experience on this plane. And that's why, you know, a lot of the ancients and, you know, Egyptians and the pharaohs and things, they have a lot of mystic beliefs about where the soul goes in the afterlife, and did you learn your lessons while you're on this plane, et cetera, et cetera. I sort of view consciousness in that same light as us having this physical experience is consciousness devolving in order to into physical form to realize itself and have this human experience that we're having now. And you mentioned before about the breath and the DMT experience. When I had my DMT experience, obviously you have the wobble, wobble, wobble. And I remember the shaman that we sat with saying, by the time you've finished holding your breath, you'll be gone anyway. And I'm quite apprehensive when it comes to things that I don't have full control over. That's why I skipped a few of the lower grade psychedelics and went straight to the most powerful one there is. Because I was like, cool, I just want to go.
Let's go.
And when he said, you'll be gone by the time you've held your breath, I'm sort of thinking, what's he talking about? What do you mean gone? Define gone. And then obviously, as you know, you have your inhalation, and by the time I lean back, I'm like, gone. Similar experience to what you described before. The interesting thing for me was that I didn't feel the disconnectedness that we feel now, right? Like you're sitting on the other side of the table to me, the things in our life that appear and seem separate from us. When you're in that experience, they're not separate. There's no sense of separation between me and the floor, me and the trees. There was a fire in the middle of the room that day. It wasn't as if the fire was happening away from me. I could feel the energy of the fire. I could feel the trees moving in the wind. And I sort of had this glimpse of the interconnectedness of all things. And it felt as if while we're on this physical plane, we borrow some of that energy and we bring it back into this physical existence for a very short period of time, 80, right. 90, maybe 100 years from when you're born. And it felt as if that is a temporary experience of what we sort of get to borrow from consciousness in this physical body. And when allowed to express itself outside of the physical body, that's the experience that you get to have. And you touched on the breath before. The first thing you do when you're born, the last thing you do when you die is the breath. And for me in the experience, anytime I placed conscious awareness on my breath, it anchored me back down into the physical body. Because when you're in that experience, if anyone's ever done 5-MeO, there is no this. There's no table, there's no me and Mitch, none of that. That's gone. This physical reality has absolutely no point of reference whatsoever. When I placed my attention on the breath, it anchored me back down into the physical body. When I placed my attention on the experience, George, physical reality was gone. And I sort of, to where I'm going with this story is a slight topic change. I've just had the birth of my first son. When he was delivered, they put him on my wife's arms, on my wife's chest, and within about 120 seconds, I looked over at the OB and I said, I've got a question for you. She's looking at me like, blood and guts and everything everywhere. And she looks at me like, what do you mean? And I said, I've got a question for you. I said, do you think that the soul inhabits the body before birth or after? And she said, why would you ask me that? And I'm like, look, I explained this story, the plant medicine story, and I've had a few experiences over the years, and I understood it that when the soul, I thought, when the child is born and they're delivered, the child goes and then bursts into tears. That's not what happened. When my son was born, that did not happen. He was already there when she delivered him. I watched I was very involved in the birthing process, and I watched her deliver him, and he was already there. There was no big breath. So it sort of distorted my perception of when I thought the soul inhabited the body. And I asked her, and she said, I think the soul is there before. And I said, what makes you say that? And she said, well, how does the embryo, when it's in the womb, come to know the voice of the parent? Because if there's no soul there until delivery, then who is it that's noticing the voice? And it sort of has rattled my consciousness cage a little bit, because my understanding of when consciousness inhabits the body, I've now watched that play out in real time. And that's sort of been, rocked a little bit by the fact that he was already there prior to my wife delivering him. And I think that, to sort of tie it all in, you mentioned, we don't really know. And I think that the pursuit of that not really knowing is actually what makes the pursuit worthy in the first place, right? Like if you had all the answers tomorrow, what are you going to do? What are you going to work on? You've got nothing to do. You've got nothing to chase after. There's no quest for knowledge, understanding, improving yourself. So I think that the pursuit of understanding consciousness is an ever-evolving one that we're not really supposed to know all of the answers to. I think there have been possibly civilizations before us that had a greater understanding, but I don't think we'll ever really know. Maybe there's something in the afterlife that perhaps gives rise to that, but I think the pursuit of understanding consciousness is supposed to be an exponential one, and we're not really supposed to know.
There's two things I'll say there, right? The first one is about 11 years ago, they discovered a chemical in the human brain, and it's called PP1. and it's responsible for amnesia. So when I was, I'd read Magicians of the Gods, and I'd been following Graham for years, and then one day on a podcast he said, I think humans suffer from amnesia. So we forget our divinity. And I think we're down here to remember. That's what I think we're doing. We're down here to remember our divinity. And if we look at an ocean, right, and we look at, see the ocean as consciousness, and we are a bubble in that ocean. And if you look at a bubble, it's a bit like looking in a spoon. You see yourself upside down. So you're actually here to understand and remember the parts of yourself and love your upside down parts of yourself, the parts of yourself that you haven't learned to love yet. And that expands and allows us to expand into consciousness and come back into it again. Because a bubble will only last a certain amount of time before it dissipates into smaller parts. And so I think we're down here remembering what we are and remembering our divinity, because I think that, God the Father is all-knowing, omnipotent energy, omnipotent, omnipresent, pure potentiality, meaning where is it not? And we contemplate that stuff inside of our mind. So we contemplate that whole equation inside of ourselves. The other thing, I think we are down here on a physical plane experiencing what it already knows, because you've heard me say it before, theory without the practical example of itself holds no weight. There's a great scene from Good Will Hunting, where he's talking to him about, you can have read as much as you want. You can have read as many books, as many Mills and Boone books on what it is to be loved. But until you actually experience the act of being loved, what you read doesn't mean anything. So we're a practical example of the theoretical wisdom of God the Father, or pure light, or pure consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. The other thing is that I was on a ship with Joe Dispenza and Jack Canfield, and I actually introduced the two of them to each other. We're sitting there having a conversation, and to be a fly on the wall, as everybody says to me, but we started to talk about the fact that they had just located where the human soul actually meets the human form. So we now know two things. Yes, we have a soul, and there is only one soul. There's not numerous souls. There's one soul, because there's only one source. And that human soul meets the human form in the microtubules in a human cell. So cells are the smallest portion of consciousness inside of a human being. What that means is that cells have purpose and meaning. So a brain cell knows it's a brain cell. It doesn't think it's a skin cell. A skin cell knows it's a skin cell. It doesn't think it's a kidney cell. So therefore, brains have purpose and meaning and direction. So if you take a cell and you blow it up to the size of a dinner plate and you put it in front of a fan in your room and you switch the fan on and it blows all the snot off the cell, what you're left with are small pieces of calcium called microtubules. And the microtubules are actually responsible for what that cell does. So therefore, that is the higher intelligence of the soul meeting the human form in the microtubules. And we sat there for a couple of hours discussing that exact conversation. We don't have time to do it now, but we now know. So what the mystics were saying, science is now proving. This is why I said earlier, science without, or mysticism without science is lame. It doesn't mean anything.
What do you think it is about the ancient cultures? What do you think that they had that we lack in today's world? Because we live in an information world. We're at the dawning in the age of Aquarius. We actually have more access to information than we have ever had before. You can give yourself a university level education on the internet for free using ChatGPT and YouTube. Yet we appear to be somewhat disconnected from source and the nature of reality a little more than the mystics and the ancients were. They seem to have a better grasp on, what are we doing here? Why are we here? And what happens after we leave? What do you think the shift for that is? Where do you think I wouldn't say we've taken a wrong turn. We're figuring it out as we go along. But what do you think the difference between them and us is?
Well, I don't think there's any difference. I just think that we have just adapted and found different ways to be able to access things. If we look back 200, 300, 400 years ago, the average lifespan was 40 years old. People were butchering each other all the time. If you didn't die of typhoid or cholera, or you weren't shot or stabbed or mutilated, that's what was happening. These things have been happening the whole time. I think that one of the problems with humans is that they equate death with stopping. And if you understand physics, Death is a figment of human imagination. There is no such thing as death. It is complete nonsense. Like, it's beyond nonsense. But I think humans equate death with stopping. So we forget our divinity, and we're here to remember it. I think we are alive in one of the most interesting times in humanity. I think that we are able to, like, you think about some of the things I've just been talking to you about now. 20 years ago, if we'd done this on a podcast, I'd have been arrested.
Yeah, correct.
They'd have come and got me in a straitjacket, and you, but we're not there. I think we're waking up at an really, really fast rate. And I think AI plays a very important role in that because it's given us a way. And I think how we are now hacking intelligence is actually really fucking primitive because we're using this device to be able to hack something that was always accessible to us. Because what the humans want shortcuts. You understand? The brain's job is to get you to your deathbed safely. So if it could sit on a toilet and urinate and defecate, that's what it would do. So the brain just wants to find the least road of resistance. But in that pursuit of the least road of resistance, some really magnificent things have happened because we want things fast and quick. But I think we are watching the turn back now towards the use of plant medicines and the use of breath work and the use of the equilibration process, being able to balance out people's perceptions, being able to literally within minutes help a person overcome anything that has ever stopped them or hindered them, let alone overcome it, but then in that same moment tools them up to be able to go get what they want, awakening that inner voice inside of them. This is happening right now. And like you and I are just part of a massive movement. The consciousness movement is a massive movement. And yes, when you have that happening, you're going to have the Temu version of it. It's just what the fuck is going to happen. You just have to have the intelligence to be able to siphon through what is shit and what is the real deal. Okay, what is actually the real deal? So I think that I don't think there's any difference. And I think, honestly, George, like, you don't want me to go down that rabbit hole, but we have been here many times. And there's been 6 major resets on this planet. That's complete wipeout. Complete wipeout, reset, boom, go again. And it's going to continue to happen again. There are artifacts in the Smithsonian that are, they have doorknobs, they have shoe imprints, they have wagon wheel imprints, they have in the Rothschilds Institute as well. And these products are over 300 million years old. They don't even get discussed. They don't, because they can't, people equate death with stopping. They believe this story about an ark and they don't realize, like, the Bible is an astral projection. It's a book about astronomy because you can't sit a fucking kid down in the middle of the desert and discuss astrophysics or astronomy with a child. So how do you explain it? Well, how do you explain the creation of the earth? Because what do kids want to do? I remember when I was a kid, I was like, Dad, why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why is the ocean green? Why is the ocean blue? Why are those mountains there? And so you want to be able to educate those kids. So the way in which they did it was through stories. And that's what the Bible is. It's just a fucking story that explains astronomy and it explains our position in the universe. And, we didn't have TVs to distract us. I remember I'm in Mexico and I've got a main scholar with me. So we, I take clients away every year. We take 40, 50 clients away to different parts of the world. We have immersed them deep into cultures. And we're with this main scholar and we're stepping over these pools of water. And I'm like, what's this? And he's like, oh yeah. And around this pool of water, it's beautifully carved and there's all these markings and measurements and I don't know what they are, they're hieroglyphs, and they'd only just worked out how to read these hieroglyphs. They've only done it in the past 20 years. And he said to me, this pool is, and I had water in it, this pool is for reflection. And I'm like, oh, okay, so you mean like meditation? And so he goes, no. He points up to the sky, he goes, reflection. He said, what they would do is they would sit around these pools and they would study the universe. And when you get to these places, like, you can't comprehend. There's we can't do today what they did. And then we try to explain it into our history and our timeline. The minute you hear any moron doing that, he's a fucking moron. You can't explain that stuff. When you go to these archaeological digs, which I've been through. I was in one that they'd only just uncovered 11 years before I got there. So we're walking around this place, and when they dig down, they're trying to find out, are these cultures, primitive, were they nomadic, were they, how long before they settled, what were they growing? Every time they dig down in these places, particularly through the Americas, or around the northern line of the planet, 100-mile wide, all the way around, that's where all the monolithic structures are. In one line, directly in line with the Great Pyramid of Giza. So as they move around and they dig down, they become more evolved. They're doing things that we can barely even attempt to do today. So what does that say? Well, it tells you that civilization and what we're being told in terms of the narrative, and it's common sense. You just have to go there to go, no, that's bullshit. No, what they told us about that is not true. There's no way. There's just no way. You can't go there and look at this stuff and think anything other than these people were in some way more advanced than we are. We're just in a technological age. Ages happen. The planet sits on an axis every 25,960 years. It does one full cycle. So we go through ages. We go through an ice age, an iron age, an industrial age, and then we're coming into the information age. But they're just ages, and they've happened over and over and over again because that planet's been doing these cycles over and over and over again forever. We're in a beautiful part of the universe. We're in the Goldilocks zone, which is fantastic. So we have life on this planet, and you're alive on this planet, and you can contemplate those things. But you got to understand, what you've been told is nonsense. Somebody drew a line in the sand, and for most of the masses, and when they drew the line, they said, this is this and that is that. And as the great Jim Carrey said, this is this and that is that. Well, this is not this. And I promise you, that is not that. And if you can just take that, it doesn't mean that you're bad or you've joined a cult or you're losing your brain. It means that now you're starting to contemplate how you're contemplating.
Who am I? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? What happens after this?
What greater questions could you ask yourself? Than to be able to expand your mind and your consciousness. And that should be your savage appetite, to understand those things and pursue a life where you answer those questions for the people that are going to come after you.
I think, one of the pillars to my business is the health pillar, right? And we talk about health in a much more sort of modern day light now. One of the blessings which I think is to come from COVID is that everybody's started to take their health more seriously, right? Everybody's got this negative perception of COVID. COVID was the best fucking thing that ever happened to me. I exited the 9 to 5. I built my business. I achieved, time, location freedom. It was the best. I'd do it again tenfold. I'd do it again with the new insight that I have now. One of the blessings to come from COVID is that people have started to take their health more seriously. And you and I have known each other for many years now. I think, you've also been on a bit of a health journey the last few years. I think that it kind of showed everybody, when you're in lockdown, okay, actually, I'm not very healthy. Actually, I need to get my shit together. Actually, if I'm going to lead some kind of physically optimized existence, I need to get my finger out. One of the other blessings to come from it is obviously lots of people separated. Cool, weren't supposed to be together in the first place. We sat in lockdown together, and then I found out that she's a narcissistic bitch, or he's a chauvinistic twat, or something like that, right? So you saw a lot of people separate. That's one of the cosmic balances. But in regards to the health niche, I think that the pursuit of, maybe enlightenment is the wrong word, but the pursuit of growth and accelerated learning in terms of your own life, one of the core facets to that is health. And you've been on a health journey the last few years, specifically around reducing the amount of alcohol that you've drunk and improving your diet and things like that. I think that's part of the bigger conversation that we're having now, is that, we're in this new information age. Something I observed last year, actually, when I had my Christmas party. I went and bought a bunch of alcohol for the Christmas party. When I'm in the bottle shop, I spoke to the guy that owns the bottle shop, and we're having a bit of a chinwag, and I said to him, how have you noticed the sales of alcohol gone? And he said, why do you ask me that? I said, I've got a personal development business, and we do a lot of blood and genetic testing, and we're noticing a lot of people have got elevated urea levels. They've got blood pressures through the roof, zinc copper ratios are all over the place, et cetera, oxidative stress. A lot of that is down to alcohol. People drink too much alcohol. And he said, the older generation that comes in here, business as normal. Barry, the 65-year-old tradesman, comes in here for his 6-pack of beer every Friday night religiously and buys a pack of cigarettes while he's here. No change. He said business is normal. But the younger generation, he said, They don't come in here anymore. He said, we never catch kids out the front asking people to buy alcohol. We're seeing this shift away from, younger, I don't know what generation it is now, whatever the current one is. We're seeing this shift towards a bigger focus to health. And it sort of highlights I believe, a bit more of an elevation in consciousness, which is that we're realizing, you mentioned it before, understanding our divinity and realizing our divinity. I think part of that comes from reducing the poisons that prohibit us from being able to see and feel and experience that in the first place. And, as I said, it's one of the cornerstone pillars to my business. And what sort of health changes have you made over the last few years that have led you to, I bang on about this all the time. When you meet someone that's in a physically optimized state, or if you've ever spent any amount of time in one, you'll want to stay there. Why? Memory, cognition, your ability to hold a conversation, your energy, everything about your existence just becomes heightened, and it's like a magnet. You got the X factor. You've got all of the ingredients to lead a physically optimized existence. How has your own health journey over the years led you to that realization that, I've known you for a long time now. This would be the healthiest you've been since I've ever known you.
I think when we look at health and well-being, I always start this conversation with this story. My grandfather smoked until he was 98 years old, smoked Camel cigarettes. And Camel cigarettes have no butt on them. And ever since I was a kid, I'd go to see my granddad every Christmas. My granddad fathered 25 children. My father's the second eldest of 25 children. So I would go over 150 cousins. I'd go and I'd sit on my granddad's knee, and I'd say to him, he always smelled the cigarettes, and his lips were always pierced from sucking on the cigarette. His fingers were yellow. And I'd say to him, Granddad, why do you smoke? And he always said the same thing to me. And he'd look at me and he'd go, I'm not going to be here next year, son, but I smoke because I love it. So I think what's important is you're always going to have the extremities, but you have to do what you love. Like, you really have to do what you love. And if you go from one absolute extremity to the other, they cause the same problems. Like, the vegans cause just as much problem to the earth as the carnivores. Like, it's the same thing. But you have to find your own sweet spot. You have to find your center point. You have to find that part of you, that state of equanimity that you love, where you're balanced about what you do. You can't just eat, goji beans for the rest of your bleeding life, because that's just ridiculous. But you gotta find what your body loves, and that's the great thing about genetic testing and blood testing, is you gotta find the things that allow you to maximize your experience and your consciousness while you're here. As you get older, for sure, you've got to be careful, because sugars are a good problem, and they cause problems with your memory. You have to be on top of that stuff. But at the same time, you don't want to, as I said, just eat goji berries your whole bleeding life, because you just can't do that. So I think that you have to find your sweet spot. I had a couple of things happen to me in the past couple of years. I had a major bike accident about 15 months ago, and I was doing tons of plant medicine, all that sort of stuff, and I kept saying, let go, let go, let go. And that was all about letting go for me. It was all about, okay, I have to let go of the old me. I was completely incapacitated for up to 6 weeks, couldn't eat, could barely walk, fractured T4, T5 in my spine, 11 fractures in my left arm, 9 fractures in my right arm. I've still got plates in my body right now. But if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have had this much deeper appreciation of my health and well-being, I was trying to pursue things like doing things on bikes and stuff like that, I really should not have been doing at the age of 52, especially when I was quite the novice. But so I think that shook me back into a state of balance and going, okay, as you get older, you get much more sensitized to your body. When you're younger, you don't, because you're able to handle things more. You can recover quicker. You can't as you get older. You just can't. You can have levels of recovery that are good, but you have to pay the price for everything that you've done before you get to that point. And, we damaged the vehicle along the way. But if you take care of what it is you're eating and what it is you're drinking, and make sure you have a healthy lifestyle, it's going to pay off. You're going to get more longevity out of things. You have to get away from your addictions. If you think that there's somebody in a fucking pharmaceutical company in a lab with a white coat on, fucking working hard to save your life, you're fucking completely deluded. And I think that was what COVID did. It made everybody realize these motherfuckers are just after money. They don't give a shit about our health. So I think that there is a revolution in how we see things. I think Gary Brecker has done a stellar job of being able to wake us up and show us what is possible. I think that right now some of it is expensive. I think it's going to become much, much cheaper. And I think that the banks, fraternities and organizations are going to have to adapt. And I think they're going to do that pretty quickly. And I think that's going to happen. You and I are going to watch that in the next 5 years. We're going to see big pharma take a swing in another direction, which is they're going to realize, oh, people just want fucking health. You know,
the money's in the longevity.
The money's in the longevity, 100%. I mean, you know of organizations that are outside of that sort of money that are funding drives to be able to, you know, look at our telomeres and be able to find the river of life, to be able to elongate the time that we have here. It's happening, dude. And it's actually happening. It's not something that's mystical. It's actually happening. And we're, again, alive and we're able to contemplate it and have that conversation. So, yeah.
I think somebody said this the other day. I can't remember who it was, that there's a better than average chance that we're going to be the last non-genetically modified human hybrids, like non-genetically modified humans. Like the next era of humans will be some kind of hybrid humanoid or some form of, intervened human. And that, our understanding of, I guess, health, longevity, biohacking is about to take an accelerated move in another direction, because we're going to start to tangle with parts of, information and technology that we don't fully understand yet in the pursuit of health. And that, we may be the last pure breed of humans before that shift comes.
You have glasses on right now.
Yes.
Okay, what do you use them for?
Blue light blocking glasses.
Okay. Do you know that the minute you put them on, you altered your humanity? And you are now part cyborg.
Externally modified with my glasses.
That's exactly right. So I think that's happening. I think the key in it all, there was a great interview a couple of weeks ago on a podcast, and Greg Braden was talking to Joe Rogan, and he said, Klaus Schwab's made a very big statement that shook the world, and he said, we are basically going to lose our humanity if we interface.
I saw that. I listened to the podcast. Pretty
fucking crazy. And I think that that's the key. And the funny thing is that I think that there is a battle for our humanity right now. And you and I know, and this is the thing that I think I personally hold on to. When I hold my son's hand, that is more magic and more real to me than anything. And I think that that's what we have to understand. That is what we have to hold on to. We have to hold on to the connection and the love that we have for one another. And when we put everything aside, George, that's all there is. And I think that part of the realization to move back to that is that we have to understand the cost of losing our humanness. And as a person sitting at home, they go, okay, well, how do I make sure I don't lose my humanity or I lose my humanness? And what I would say to you is that the people that you love, hold them and tell them you love them as often as you can. Every opportunity, tell them you love them. Every time you go to bed at night, lean over and give your partner a hug and a kiss and let her know you love her. And every time you can, sit outside under the stars, light a fire with your partner, with your children, and talk and connect and eat food. That's how we do it. Walk on the grass as often as you can without your shoes on. As often as you can. My wife is an expert at this. She teaches me this stuff. She puts me on my ass. She teaches me this stuff all the time. We'll get out. You need animals in your house. If you haven't got dogs, don't get cats. They're shit. But if you got dogs, I'm only joking. If you got dogs, you need to have dogs in your house. Dogs bring something into the house that you cannot replace. You cannot replace what an animal does in the house and what it does for your children, what it does for the both of you. We are animals. That's what we are. Don't want to lose your humanity. Get your fucking shoes off. Hold the people around you that you hold dear to your heart and tell them all the fucking time. Don't let your ego get in the way. It's coming to Christmas time. Hopefully this podcast will be up before Christmas. When you go to fucking Christmas dinner, let your mother know. You fucking know how much she put in, how much she loved you. Every breath was about you, even with your father. Let your father know. He did an incredible job. That's our humanity. That's the thing we can't lose. We cannot lose that stuff.
And I think also, that's the thing that AI isn't going to be able to replicate
Yeah.
because, we can become genetically modified, we can become, humanoid robots, we can have all these things, but we can't replace, those little everyday tasks, the little deeds, I actually can't remember the exact terminology, but Gandalf talks about it at the end of The Lord of the Rings.
Right.
He talks about the hobbits and the everyday deeds of Shire folk and how powerful that is about, sharing experiences together, having dinners, caring for the people you love, taking walks in nature, things like that, that realistically don't appear to have too much meaning, but they're the things that sort of make, that's what really matters.
I'm going to do a clip on that.
Yeah. I actually should rewatch it because I can't remember, but Gandalf says to somebody in the end of the Lord of the Rings movie about the everyday deeds of Shire folk and how powerful that is.
Yep, cool.
It's a cool little clip. Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit. So I know that you've got a personal development business, but I also know that that's not where you have made majority of your wealth.
Yeah.
And one of the cornerstones to my business is wealth. I interviewed a guy last week. We talked about wealth. He's quite interested in sort of commercial property. I know that you have a keen interest in property.
Yeah.
You've built a successful business in the personal development industry, but you've made a lot more money outside of the personal development industry. How have you done that? And why did you decide to go down that way? You and I have talked about our two wells, your cash flow well and your investment well. Why did you pick the well that you chose, and what well did you pick?
Well, one of the things I say to people all the time is the key to getting ahead financially is not so much what you do, it's your discipline in being able to save. So people say to me, so how did you do it? I just saved, and every opportunity I saved, and I saved, and I saved, and I just kept saving. And then I used my money to make more money, because money is a byproduct from making more money. Now, when you do this and you save and you start to get really, really disciplined with your money, money flows to where there's the greatest amount of organization, right? That's why we have corporations, because they're really organized with their money, and it flees from where there's the least. So that was one of the wells that I dug. So I say to my clients all the time, dig one well, dig it deep, and dig it well. So that was one of the wells that I dug. And part of that well was that I had an insatiable appetite to understand property ever since I was a kid. I had a conversation with my father when I was 8 years old where we were making our way to see Pope John Paul, and I'm in his car with him, and I said two things to him. I said, first off, Dad, if you could come back here and do anything that you wanted, what would you do? And he said to me, I would speak for a living. That's what my father said. And then I said to him, okay, how do you become a millionaire, Dad? And he said to me, bricks and mortar, son. Bricks and mortar. And ever since then, I knew, okay, if I want to get ahead financially, it's got to be property is the way that you do it. And I just ended up finding my niche. The first property I bought, I did a subdivision on it. I was 20 years old, and I made $179,000, and I did it in 9 months. At 20 years old, dude, making $179,000, motherfucker, I had found the golden goose. Like, oh my God. And I ran around telling all my mates, man, all you got to do is I'll show you how to do it. And none of them wanted to hear it. In the end, they would tell me to shut up, stop talking about it. So I realized at that point that was my niche. That was the thing that I had found, and that was how I did it. And I just kept doing it. So I do one subdivision, then I did two subdivisions, then I kept doing it, then I kept doing it. And then my life got really busy, and I had a time period of about 4 years where I couldn't do it. And then that's when I met one of my business partners, who that's what he did. And then, so I just started funding him. So I'd fund him, he would find the properties, he'd take a cut, and now we do some pretty big subdivisions. But it was really down to just find your niche. I've tried to veer from it over the years. And every time I try to veer from it, I'm not fucking with you. Every time I try to veer from it, I fail. I just make a balls of it, or I lose money. And I'm like, so now I'm like, no, I'm not doing that anymore.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane. And money is really not that difficult. Like, the problem is people have generations of loyalty to the poverty mentality of the parents and the people they were surrounded with. That's the fucking problem. You know what I mean? That's really the problem. The problem is not how to master money. Mastering money is my 9-year-old can do it. It's so simple to the point where you never worry about money. You've just always got money because it's just an energy game. It's all just an energy game. But if you don't deal with that loyalty and that stuff, it doesn't matter what I show you. It doesn't matter what I teach you. If you don't deal with that innermost dominating thought that has you sabotaging your wealth, you'll never get ahead. You know, you're always just going to be ordinary. And the problem is that birds of a feather flock together, right? So we then end up in a society where you have people who are mastering the mastered, and then you have people who just end up in the paddock, you know, and they don't think that they can get out of it. You know, they don't realize, no, you can break free anytime you want. You know, but the problem is it's comfortable in there. And as I said, birds of a feather flock together. So now what happens is we have people who have certain issues from their past, certain loyalties from their past that they don't want to feel. The banks and fraternities then market to those insecurities by selling you products that make you feel good in short term. Temporarily. And then as soon as you feel good short term or temporarily, that becomes your addiction. So you give up on your dreams and aspirations and you pursue an addiction of short-term satisfaction, which costs you. A long-term vision pays, short-term satisfaction costs. And so the key is to have a long-term vision, because when you have a long-term vision, you get the short-term satisfaction anyway, except it's a bit better. Do you know what I mean? Instead of jumping on the ferry over to an island or to Rottnest or whatever, you're actually jumping on a super yacht and heading over there with your buddies, and you're getting to do those things anyway, but just at a higher rate. Now, birds of a feather flock together, so you don't want to pluck with the chickens, you want to fly with the eagles. And the thing you have to understand about being an eagle, if you choose to do that, if you choose to be an eagle, you're going to fly alone. Because eagles fly alone. No matter what anybody tells you. They get ridiculed, they get slammed, they get beat up, they get put down. And if you're not getting ridiculed, slammed, beat up, and put down, you're fucking doing something wrong. And the other thing that is that when you get into the sky as an eagle, you look around and you see other eagles who have their territory. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that there's no other eagles up there. There is. But you learn from those eagles. You're not caught with the stuff that's going on the ground. You're more focused, and then you're able to pinpoint and see deals, and you're able to execute. That's what you need to do. And the minute you do that, like you see it all the time, like deals come to me and come to you that are nuts. And people go, you know, he's so lucky. I'm not lucky. I just understood that preparedness meets opportunity. Because if you're not fucking prepared, you're never going to meet the opportunity because you're not prepared. You know, the reason you don't get a $10 million deal is because emotionally you wouldn't be able to sustain $10 million because you got all these fucking insecurities going on. You don't realize the gap between a high net worth individual and a low net worth individual is not money, it's self-worth. Meaning it's the qualities and attributes that you would need to be able to manage $10 million and you valuing those things. That's what self-worth is. Self-worth is not, oh, I'm amazing, I'm beautiful, I'm magnificent, I'm wonderful. No, self-worth is I'm organized, diligent, disciplined, focused. That's what self-worth is. And I know that I am those things. So you can rely on me to give you me your $30 million because I'm going to turn that $30 million into 60. Because I'm organized, diligent, disciplined, focused.
And that version of you already exists somewhere, so go and get familiar with it.
Yes. And understand that it's a feeling game. Feel into the qualities and attributes that you bring to the world.
I think on the Eagles thing, you know, this is probably maybe 5 years ago now. There's a Chris Williamson podcast, and he talks about something called a lonely chapter. I think he's interviewing Hormozy, but don't quote me on it. He talks about the lonely chapter, and he describes the lonely chapter as, you know, there's a period in everyone's journey that you go through where you're not sufficiently developed, where you've made it through the other side of it yet, but you know that you're not with your old set of friends either, and you're stuck in the messy middle. Do I, you know, get a bag on the weekend with the boys, go back to old ways?
It was great.
But I don't also know who I am and there's this messy middle. And he speaks about the fact that anyone that's gone from a place they're at to a place they're trying to get to, they will have experienced that. And this is something I talk about with the clients a lot. I'm not sure that the lonely chapter ever really goes away, because the more that you pursue those eagle-related tendencies, the more that you start to realize that actually the path to that end outcome, that end goal is quite a lonely journey. It's not like you get to be lonely for the middle bit and then you become super social at the end of it. You actually find that the more you try to be an eagle, the more you will actually spend a lot of time flying on your own. Eagles don't fly next to each other. As you said, they're aware of other eagles. They don't attack the other eagles, but they do spend quite a lot of time on their own. I think that's especially for the younger generation, and some of the clients that I've worked with and some of the young people that I speak to, they always ask about the fact that, you know, it's difficult to do these things because you're on your own, because it's lonely, because you're ostracized from your group of friends, because you're not going out on the weekends anymore, you're not doing those things. And I think probably the biggest misconception is that eventually goes away. I'm not sure that it does. I think that actually it's not as bad, but you will always have a lonely element to pursuing the eagle journey.
You know, like I'm 52 years old now, right? I'm about to turn 53. And I can tell you that in the past 2 years, I have filtered out of my life a lot of people that I just, and it happens, you know, but here's the great thing, right? I have people in my life that are so fucking awesome. They're so high quality and they're so beautiful and they're so generous and giving and they have great minds, you know, and they think and we laugh and, you know, we do all of those wonderful things and we discuss concepts and ideas. And for a long time there, when I had all the other people in my life, I felt lonely because I didn't feel I had anybody that I could discuss those things with. So when my life was full with people, that was when I was actually my loneliest. And I also felt that was when I felt most isolated because, I mean, you saw it, right? You saw it when we were doing activities together. You saw it. And we discussed it on numerous occasions. Hey, look at this. Isn't this interesting? But that was when I really filtered out the people in my life that I love and that made, you know, a great difference to who I was as a person. And I felt the most amount of humility with, not appreciation, but humility with. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that if you're with all your buddies and you're afraid to leave them and you're afraid to fly like an eagle, I promise you, motherfucker, you are the loneliest now. And when you get up into that sky and you look around, you will hang out with other eagles. And you will have a greater overall insight of the world and how it works. And yes, to do that, you have to leave the ground. You have to leave those people behind. But it's conservation of energy. You cannot lose a group of chickens without inheriting an eagle mentality. You can't lose the chicken mentality without inheriting. And the problem is the loyalty that we have to those people. And most of those people don't even fucking like you. And you don't even fucking like them. And most of them are assholes. And you would never, like, you would say to yourself, what the fuck are you hanging out with those people for? And they have destructive mentalities and, you know, they don't really care. And they drop you like the drop of a hat. They wouldn't care. They just drop you. And when you start to realize that, it's okay. You realize it's okay for me to leave. But I think I would agree with you. There's times when it's definitely like, okay, but I know that at any moment in time I can pick up the phone and ring any of my closest mates and like you, Alana, like any of those guys, Martin, Greg, you know, any of my friends in India. There's so many people that I could ring, but we all have that. We're all there. We all can sit down and have that conversation. Do you know what I mean? We can all sit there and go, yeah.
I think, you know, when I started Quantum Club, I never realized the significance of the community. I mean, I knew the significance of the community aspect, but I didn't realize that I was accidentally solving part of that lonely chapter by doing it. Because in the pursuit of starting a community, you're working on things that everybody's interested in, like health, like wealth, like mindset. You're doing things together. You're traveling together. You're going away together. You're building community, etc. I accidentally stumbled across a fractal part of that in building the community because they're all doing the same thing. And I had this conversation with a client maybe 6 months ago. I was like, why would you not want to hang out with a bunch of people that are disciplined, working on their health, doing cool things? The whole premise for that was, to build a community. But in the pursuit of that, you've actually got a lot of the solutions to some of those lonely chapter problems because some of these people can do business together. Some of these people are now like-minded individuals. Some of these people are interested in the things that you're interested in. So sort of accidentally in the pursuit of starting something bigger and giving back to the world a little bit, I stumbled across a bit more of a broader community which solves that problem. But I never realized the significance of that at the time when I started it. You made me think of it then when we just touched on it.
The other thing is, though, is that we have to go through a period of hanging out with people so you realize, fuck, I'd never do business with that person, or fuck, I'd never want to hang out with that person. You have to go through that period of siphoning and sifting out the people that you would actually hang out with and do time with and spend time with and educate yourself with and have those experiences. And it's just part of the process, it's just part of what goes on. There's nothing you can do to avoid it.
One of the things I didn't do last time because we chin-wagged for too long and ran out of time, I want to do some rapid-fire questions. So little short answer questions, nothing too onerous.
Okay.
Some a bit cliche, but I like them. What's one book that everyone should read?
There's so many. One book that everybody should read is Think and Grow Rich.
Napoleon Hill. Cool. One ancient civilization that you would like to visit in its prime?
I would say the Incan civilization.
What's the biggest myth in personal development?
That it's hard.
What's the best investment that you've ever made, financially or otherwise?
Educating myself.
Spending money on your education. Morning person or a night owl?
Morning person.
Always been that way?
Yeah.
What's the most important question that people should be asking themselves right now?
Am I in love with myself?
Cool. Many years ago, I listened to you ask 3 questions, and I've asked some influential people those questions. I've asked some wealthy people those questions. I've asked some people that I don't like those questions, and they've always elicited some interesting responses. And I think it would be a good opportunity to ask you those 3 questions. So, question number 1: What's one piece of advice from your life, and what would what would be one piece of advice from your life?
Create an innermost dominating, get connected to the innermost dominating thought that is connected with your vision.
Cool. Number 2, what's the most profound experience you've had in your life, and would you be willing to share it?
Sure. The most profound experience I had in my life was when I was 26 years old and I sat with a woman and I had my first breakthrough. And I was about to take my life. I was about to kill myself. And a buddy of mine who was just in an event with me the other day brought me along and introduced me to this woman, and I had a conversation with her. And I'd done a lot of personal development work, and I just kept running into rooms full of people that it was just, I could have fed little Ethiopia with the amount of money that I'd spent on human development. I'd sat with Deepak, Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, Neil, the top metaphysicians in the world. None of it worked. Like none of it worked. And then I ended up in this room with this woman, and then she said, okay, I'm going to break you through. And then I had this breakthrough with her, and it just changed everything. I went into a complete state of whiteout. I heard every instrument in the world playing at once. I started to lose bodily function. I was working on my father with her. She started to look like my dad. And then I realized in that moment that everything I thought my father hadn't given me, he had. And I started to laugh and cry simultaneously. And then I realized that every breath that he'd ever taken was about me. And then I realized that I'd been running a story about a man who loved me in a way that was unexplainable. And then I realized in that moment how much he loved me. And I was laughing because it was just so fucking stupid, and it was so simple. It was so simple. And that was the most profound. That changed the whole trajectory of my life. It didn't just change my life, it gave me a life. And it was bonkers. And I was facing 10 years in jail. I was about to go to prison. And I hadn't spoken to my father in 10 and a half months. It was 4:00 in the morning when I left this woman's house. I'm driving down the street, and my phone, I had a black Motorola phone that you flip open with a long aerial and red digital writing on it. And I answered the phone. I said, hello. And it was my father. And he said to me, Mitch, son, I just want you to know that I love you. And he said, now I'm going back to bed. And I realized in that moment, okay, there's no way this thing could have shown me this unless it wants me to do something with it. And then that became my mission, even though I ended up going to prison. And I went to prison for international drug running, for running ecstasy all over the world because I was a raver. And I served 18 months in prison. And I remember I was at the end of my prison sentence, and I'm in a prison farm, and there's all these guys sitting around. There's about 5 of them, and they're all whinging about, oh my God, what am I going to do when I leave here? I've been to jail. Nobody's going to employ me. And one of the guys looks at me and he says to me, so Mitch, what are you going to do when you leave? I just come out of the education centre. He goes, what are you going to do when you leave? And I said, well, I'm going to get on stage and I'm going to speak on human development and personal development. And he looked at me with this state of disbelief, and he looked at me and he said to me, have you had a look around you, mate? Like, you're in jail. And I went, yeah, I know. And I'm going to tell everybody that if I can turn my life around And I can go from being worse off than the bum of the street, facing 10 years in jail, than anybody can. And if I can do it, then they can do it. And then my mission became about, okay, I'm going to follow through on that. And I wanted to be able to create systems to be able to make sure that people actually accomplish that stuff. That was the most profound experience from my life.
Very good. And last question, what is the greatest thing that somebody else has ever done for you?
This is a fairly simple answer, and it is loved me when I didn't. That was that's happened a few times throughout my life. That happened probably the most about, as I said, when I had my accident. I realized that I'd never actually let my wife love me. And I was always the doer, the one that stepped up, the one that earned, the one that made things happen.
Provider.
I was the provider. And for the first time, I couldn't do that. For the first time, I couldn't provide. Well, not that I couldn't provide, I physically couldn't do anything. And if I was lying in bed and I had a T4 and T5 fracture in my spine, which would turn into a quadriplegic, I'm lying in bed, and if I moved at 3 o'clock in the morning, she was up out of that bed, around by my side going, are you okay? What do you need? Do you need to go to the toilet? Let's get you up. What do you need? And I'd be like, no, I'm okay. And that went on for 6 weeks. I couldn't eat. We got a bidet. The day she said, there's one thing I'm not going to do is wipe your arse. But we got a bidet straight away, and that was it. That was my whole thing. That was realizing that's nothing else matters. Like, nothing else matters. Everything else that you think you got going on in your life is nonsense. It's bullshit. The only thing that truly matters is that you get that you are loved. That's the whole purpose of this whole fucking thing. Like, there's nothing greater. People say to me all the time, what's the meaning of life? You know what? Nothing other than love. That's it. It's all about love. The whole thing is love. It's like, scientifically, I can break it down into light. I can show you that it's just love. And that's, the piece of advice I would give. It is the most profound experience, and it's the greatest thing. It's all been about that one word, love. Nothing else matters. Look at me, you got me fucking crying.
Sorry, mate. Very good. So, how do people find you? Where can they contact you? You want to go drop some socials, where can they find you?
So, if you just look up MJB Seminars, we run lots of free events. Right now, you can get me on Instagram, and if you just check out Mitchell J. Behan, or on TikTok, Mitchell J. Behan, and then you can get access to free resources there that are fucking amazing. You just click on the link in the bio and away you go. And the first thing we tackle with people is, let's turn your money around, because your net worth and your self-worth are intrinsically linked, and we're going to deal with whatever it is you need to deal with. And it doesn't cost you anything to do that. To just jump on there and start going, it doesn't cost you anything. It's free.
Very good. Anything else you want to add?
It's great to see you doing this, buddy.
Thank you. It's been on the cards for a while.
Very proud of you coming in here, and I'm glad you asked me along.
I've been putting it off for a while, and to be honest, the purpose of the podcast is actually because I think that the content world is becoming plagued. I think this whole AI thing is, we talked about it before the podcast started, the whole Maslow's hierarchy of feeling like you need to belong. We're moving away from that. The further we go into the digital age, the more AI generated short form artificial content comes out, the less people resonate with it. And I found that with my own content too. I was like, my content is feeling forced. It's feeling, not genuine. It's feeling inauthentic. And a podcast is the most authentic way you can do content, because you're just talking about things that you're interested in. And you and I have similar interests, and, we've had lots of different experiences together. And to be honest, the reason for the podcast is so that I can have more meaningful, authentic, and real conversations without the modern flair that short form content has on it. And I actually think that the move back towards long form, authentic content will continue to be a part of the future as we become more integrated with AI.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, my 2 accounts have blown up in the past 3 weeks. And one of the things that I've noticed, what I found was, and what made it blow up, was I found an access to be able to spark a person's interest, but then I started to talk about real life, the real life narrative of what was said in that piece. And the minute I did that, it just went bananas. And like even the feedback that I get, you're always going to get extremities. You always get lunatics. It's like the shopping mall theory, If you're standing at a fucking till and you got 400 people come past your till every day, 10% of them are fucking lunatics, and there's nothing you can do about it. But so you've got the extremities, but the feedback that we've been getting is really, really great. People just going, listen, we're really enjoying this. Like, this is fantastic. I never thought of the movie that way. I never seen it that way. thanks for expressing it and helping me to understand. It's always stuck in my mind what they were talking about in The Wizard of Oz or The Matrix or what it was, the narrative was actually all about. So explaining the narrative with a personal development edge has just been fantastic, and a human transformation edge has just been fantastic. So I think that's where we're heading.
Different way to do content. And I think it kind of just plays back to the same thing, which is that the people that are watching those videos are asking themselves similar questions.
100%.
What's going on? What's happened the last few years?
100%.
What am I supposed to be doing here? Because I'm not supposed to be just paying taxes and working some dead-end, unfulfilling job. There's more to life than that. Yeah. And I think more people now are going, there might be. What do I do with that information? How do I get access to that information? Yeah. It's the
dawning of the age of Aquarius.
The cosmic balance. Cool. Thanks for coming on.
Lovely. Love doing it.